The Israeli military released footage on Sunday purporting to show weapons it has claimed during its advance into Syria after the ousting of the Bashar Assad regime. The footage is said to show mines, anti-tank missiles and rockets seized in the area around Hermon. An IDF statement said the weapons were taken away to be destroyed. Israel seized a swath of southern Syria along the border with the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights days after Assad was ousted by rebels, as well as seeking to target the country's military infrastructure through airstrikes. The capture of the buffer zone, a roughly 400 square kilometer demilitarized area in Syrian territory, has sparked condemnation, with critics accusing Israel of violating a 1974 ceasefire and possibly exploiting the chaos in Syria to make a land grab. The Israeli military released footage on Saturday it said showed troops operating in the northern Gaza Strip. The army said in a statement that its troops destroyed a Hamas complex in an area known as the Officers' Neighborhood. As the war continues on the ground, Hamas said in a statement that indirect ceasefire negotiations were set to resume on Friday, a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that he authorized a delegation from the Mossad intelligence agency, the Shin Bet internal security agency and the military to continue the talks in Qatar. The US-led talks have repeatedly stalled and Netanyahu has vowed to press ahead in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed. But the militants, while greatly weakened, have repeatedly regrouped, often after Israeli forces withdraw from areas. The war was sparked by Hamas-led militants' attack into Israel on October 7, 2023. They killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and abducted around 250. Around 100 hostages are still inside Gaza, at least a third believed to be dead. Israel's retaliation has killed more than 45,700 Palestinians in Gaza, and women and children make up more than half the dead, according to the territory's health ministry. The ministry doesn't distinguish between civilians and combatants in its tally. Israel's military says it only targets militants and blames Hamas for civilian deaths because its fighters operate in dense residential areas. The army says it has killed 17,000 militants, without providing evidence. The war has caused widespread destruction and displaced about 90% of Gaza's population of 2.3 million. Winter has now arrived, and hundreds of thousands are sheltering in tents near the sea.
The Russian occupation army is suffering very heavy losses while advancing in the Lyman direction. At the same time, the Russian armed forces have not achieved any success in this area. This statement was made by the well-known Z propagandist Yuri Podolyaka in his blog. He accused the Russian armed forces command of the meat grinder taking place near Lyman. There, the occupation army has been using the meat assault tactic for a very long time to advance, but has had no success. The losses on this section of the front are colossal. As expected, we were driven out of Novoivanovka. For a couple dozen huts we laid down. I don't even know how many hundreds of soldiers, absolutely senselessly. I just don't understand when all this will end. Does our command in Moscow really like this? How many more guys can they lay down in senseless attacks on this section of the front? This has been going on for more than a month or two. How can this be? The propagandist complained. The Lyman direction is the northern part of the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian Defense Forces liberated this territory from Russian occupation in the fall of 2022, and the Russians have not been able to restore their lost positions 2 years later. The Russian occupying army is attempting to increase its offensive pace near the town of Lyman in Donetsk region. To this end, the enemy has deployed additional assault units from the 283rd and 488th Motorized Rifle Regiments of the Russian Armed Forces to the area. The Ukrainian security and defense forces have inflicted significant losses on these newly arrived Russian units, with some assault groups losing their combat effectiveness, Ukraine's Defense Intelligence report reads. In order to continue offensive operations, the command of the occupying forces is resorting to methods of pressure, coercion, and intimidation. Lightly wounded invaders are being sent into meat assaults, Ukraine's Defense Intelligence stated. Demoralized Russian forces are reportedly refusing to fight, citing a lack of reliable shelters from Ukrainian drones.